Hey everybody, we're here again with Todd Zemek. We spoke last time about men and what happens during a session with him, what's up in men's world, what are their struggles, and we're having a little bit of a he said, she said moment where we're going to talk about women today with Todd. Todd, welcome.
Thanks so much, Grace.
Let's just get started. What is the number one thing that you're finding is up in women's worlds?
What I see all the time, and this is why I wanted to sort of step out and just normalise this for women. I want to start by saying that this is not just my opinion. This is me sharing the truth of what women have explicitly brought to me over decades. And so often there are things that they're not able to really speak with their mothers about, their best friends about, or their sisters. And where things just seem to fall through the cracks. And so I just really wanted to put that out on the table. And one of the biggest things is this idea of having to accommodate everybody else, and that culturally that's what I've got to do. That's where my worth lies. So whether it's in being a partner or a mother or a friend, that I have to minimize myself in order to maximize everybody else, that I've got to put other people first. And if I do that, then I'm lovable. But the danger is the flip side, that if I do ever put myself first, then I'd be unlovable. And that's a really tough position to be in.
Do you know what's coming up for me? I remember a time when my kids were young and, we'd get a whole chicken and I'd give all the yummy best bits to everyone else, and I'd sort of end up with the little bits and pieces. And it only dawned on me years later, hang on a minute, how about I have some of the breast meat? So it's where we're cutting ourselves off in order to fulfill those roles. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's such a true metaphor. It's not just a metaphor, but literally, if we don't reach out and take, we get nothing. And
it's interesting that you, sorry to interrupt, but not sorry. You use the word take, and that has the energy. We feel like if we do something, it's taking, rather than actually, well, hang on a minute, is it really taking the breast? Or is it something different? Yeah.
Well, I would argue that it is taking, and that's a good thing. Whereas
wow, this is such a good conversation, because to me it feels really wrong to take.
That's exactly right, because the depth of that belief is that if I'm going to be lovable, I've got to give. Now, you would give to any member of your family and feel good about it, but would you give to yourself in the same way?
You know what? That's the way you're saying it there is the way that it's softer. It's like, wow, can we actually give to ourselves rather than that having to be like a take energy?
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost like we feel like it goes into a take thing and it's wrong. But what if it's actually gifting to ourselves and gifting to others?
And I think that's the change. Wow. And so we've got to use language that works for you. And so, for example, if take feels wrong for you, then we flip it around and we say, well, what's a better way to serve the family? And if that means that I'm serving myself so that I can serve others better, so be it. But the practical reality remains the same. If after having cooked that incredible meal, prepared that meal, if you're sitting at the table and your hands don't reach down for that chicken, or your hands aren't holding cutlery that's going to take food to your mouth, who's going to feed you? So the challenge is, if you're going to stabilize and then grow for your benefit and for the benefit of others in your life, then you have to be the one that's reaching out. You have to be the one that's...
So what's going on for us that there is that wrongness around gifting, breast meat to ourselves as well as everyone else in the family?
Yeah.
What is that about, that wrongness?
It's a rich metaphor, isn't it, in terms of feeding? Exactly. It's this is the challenge that I see all the time, is that as women listen to themselves, and unfortunately it's often through that sense of deprivation that they start to feel weakened. And then they're dealing with anxiety and depression and all these diffuse problems. But as they really start to attune to themselves and listen to the truth, they're picking up those signs of hunger. They're picking up these signs from their body, from their hearts and their thinking about what is it that I need in the world. And the number one obstacle that I see all of the time, and a big reason for what we're talking about here, is that if I grow and get stronger in myself, if I'm clear on what I need, does that mean that I'm selfish? And that is the stumbling block that women hit all the time, and they turn around and they just keep banging their head against that brick wall. And so things start to change when we redefine, are we being selfish by focusing on ourselves?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's such an interesting thing. I mean, I've seen it with other women where, we've heard about it with the aeroplanes, for example. Give oxygen to yourself and then your children, and
Yes.
And that's actually the correct thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah. And well,
So
what's coming up for me? Sorry, go.
I was just going to say that's one point where women would feel that that's justifiable. If I don't have oxygen, I will die. where they struggle is, well, wouldn't it be really selfish if I just kept investing in myself, if I kept carving out time, if I was more detailed in what I requested, and that wasn't just for my survival, it was for my growth. and so
crazy, hey?
And so really shifting beliefs around the fact that yes, I am doing this for myself because my growth matters. I don't have to wait until I'm dying. I don't have to wait until it's a desperate survival need for me
life
to
or death
open my mouth.
situation.
Exactly.
Wow. The thing that's really pinging for me now is just how we go into selfishness, but also we go into the wrongness of the choice and how we cut ourselves off. And then, of course, all the other things I'm sure you see in your practice happen where, some people might go into martyrdom or resentment or anger, instead of actually what you're saying is acknowledging the need. I'm hungry right now. I'm hungry for meditation, or hungry for a new hobby, or whatever it is.
Because we have all of these legitimate needs in order to feel safe, and then in order to feel really alive at all of those different levels, physically, in terms of nourishment, socially, intellectually, sexually, spiritually. And so we do have a lot of these needs. Now, one of the greatest fears around that selfishness is, am I too much? Am I going to be too needy? And so as we strengthen and we listen to our needs, we discover that, oh my God, I need a lot. In order to survive and thrive, I need a lot. And then the fear is, am I going to be too much?
God, you're saying so much that's just in my world at the moment, because you talked about needy, and for me that's got a different energy to the need that you're talking about, which is like a generative, creative need. Like, I need to be received, a creative. And then there's the needy, which is, I've put all my, your awareness, or you're greater than I am and I need you. I've lost a sense of my own capacities to actually create change for myself.
Yes.
Have you found that what can you speak about that?
Absolutely.
The need versus the need that's generative?
Yeah, exactly. So it gets fused so rapidly, and this is where we need to shine a light on that definition. So it gets fused that as soon as, especially if I haven't done it very often, if it's new to me, there's an anxiety that this must be dangerous if I haven't been there before. I'm running a real risk. And the fact that there is this overlap, if you think of a Venn diagram, there's this overlap in terms of, actually, there is some truth to that. Maybe I am needy. Maybe I am selfish. But what I offer people is to make that more distinct, is to just go into that fear and say, well, what if you are? And what if you are a little bit needy? What if you are a little bit selfish 1% of the time?
And what if it's not wrong? And what if you didn't resist and react it to make it bigger than it is?
What if it's going to help you grow, and it's going to help inspire others as they see you start to grow, and it's going to inspire others to speak up for that percentage of the time when they're actually starving. So this is really, really serious in terms of living a full life, that if you don't have these needs met, just like that metaphor of hunger, that you'll lead a really empty and fragile life. So if you expected that, you're supposed to take less and not eat so much, then you'd have no energy for anything. So what I'll often say is, just to get the ball rolling, is I'll say to women, what if you gave yourself full permission to be in emergency, to make a big deal out of this, to actually express the details of this? What if you gave yourself permission to do that 1% of the time? Would that be okay? That this wasn't about logic. This was about responding to the truth of how you're feeling and what you're needing. And you put yourself in the driver's seat or in the front seat. You make really explicit, urgent, detailed requests of other people 1% of the time. And logically, you can see women will say, okay, well, I guess if my partner was to need that 1% of the time, or one of my kids needed that 1% of the time, I guess that would be okay. Come to think of it, they express that a hell of a lot more than 1% of the time. So
yeah.
if I gave that to myself 1% of the time, would that be okay? Would that be liberating? But another point that I really love is that it's actually educating the people around you. It's educating them about what happens to you internally and how they can serve you. And so without that detailed, more extreme expression, they never get to learn. So you don't get to receive, but they also don't get to learn. And this is part of what happens in relationships all the time, that men are desperate to feel like they're competent. And so if women aren't expressing what they need in great detail, and they might do it and water that down through, through complaints or expressions of pain and expressions of neglect through nagging, for example, and they never fully express that, the men never fully know where they're at, the depth of what they're feeling and what they need. So men don't feel like they're succeeding. So sometimes they actually do need those more extreme examples so that men can learn why this is important and how they can succeed.
So you would suggest to women to just, get clear on what exactly they need, whether it's, need for their own body or in what they would need in relationship, like maybe write a list. And like, how would you get a woman to...
Well, I guess
I'm sure they probably don't even realize what their needs are. A lot of women have really cut themselves off to the point where they probably don't even know what they need.
Yeah,
what their needs are.
So I guess the first step would just be legitimizing that you do have needs, and you have needs at all these different levels, and they're going to be changing through the different chapters of your life. So just asking that question, what do I need? So starting to develop a relationship with yourself, and then repeating that question. What do I need? And you do this with your children. Sometimes they'd be able to express that explicitly. Other times it would just be intuitively that you'd pick up on it. But if the answer is, I don't know what I need, come back and ask again later. This is a relationship that's starting to grow. Listen to your body. Listen to your emotions. Fantasize. So use fantasy around what would be the most extreme thing that would light me up. Listen to
you say fantasize, and it's triggering something that because I always say indulge. Like if you don't know it, just to indulge for 3 days. That's true.
Great. Great. So indulge has a real sort of sweetness to it. Yeah.
So it is real. Okay, if I make this choice, I'm going to indulge in it for 3 days, and then I'll get some awareness.
So that's your way of kind of playfully giving yourself permission, right? Great.
Yeah. And then what I find is, like, I'll indulge in it. For example, if I want to move into a particular house, I'll indulge that it's real. I've moved there. For 3 days, I make it real, and then I get the awareness of, oh, actually, no, it doesn't feel good. Or it'll be like, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Awesome. So it sounds like when you indulge, it sounds like or a sensual, like an experience that you're having through your senses, that you actually start to embody some of that.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like energetically, I've said yes to this. So
Awesome.
whether it's going out on a date with a guy, it's like, okay, I'm going to indulge that I've said yes to this date. And I might not have said
Awesome.
yes to him, like logically,
Awesome.
or, and then
Yeah.
I'll get a feeling like, oh no, it doesn't feel good.
So
So I'll say
it
no.
sounds like I won't put the exclusive focus on you, I promise. But it sounds like it sounds like one of the things that you've got really good at is giving yourself that permission to play and to play with that
Super
indulgence. It's kind
important.
of like you give yourself permission. You say, "Okay, Grace, you go for it."
Yeah, that's
Excellent.
pretty much it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't always take 3 days. Normally, it's really obvious whether
Yes.
it's something that's going to create or decay.
Yes.
By
Yes.
what you
And then through that dialogue and that ongoing conversation internally, the answer will emerge. So you don't have to come up with that response initially with a black and white answer, but you give yourself the space to remain in contact with yourself, to playfully indulge and experiment with how that feels. So I think that's a fantastic way to do it. I always say that preparation is action. And so you're kind of doing this preparatory trial run internally, And then the next stage would be that you would talk with girlfriends, for example, about, okay, I've been indulging and this is what my body's telling me, or this is what I'm feeling, or this is what I'm starting to notice. And then you'd experiment. Is that okay for me to be me with people that I trust? And if you've got, good quality friends who are actually capable of, backing you up as an individual, then it gives you a chance to actually, embody that, stand on your own 2 feet, say, this is who I am, this is what I need. And so I think that's really important, that you're giving yourself permission to ask, permission not to know, permission to return to that conversation because you're a priority, some permission to indulge, and then permission to take that out into the world with people that you trust. And so one of the things I see is like a developmental thing for a lot of women who've been accommodating their whole life, especially in romantic relationships when they've been injured. And this is a really healthy thing. They'll come back to friends to soothe and strengthen. And sometimes there's a bit of a protective, sarcastic sort of tone to this. And so they can use that as a place to defend themselves against the fact that what they've tried didn't work, that they were legitimately hurt in their relationships. And so that's great. If people are in that space, stay there. That's perfectly great if it's strengthening you. But the challenge is, how do I bring in connection with, particularly with other women who are clear that they want to continue that conversation with themselves and others, and then learn the skills to cope with guilt, the fear of selfishness, as they go out into the world and negotiate for what they need, whether it be with family, whether it be in romantic relationships, or indeed in the world. And so nothing wrong with having a protective base. But the challenge is, one of the things I am going to need in order to grow and move forward is I'm going to need people in my life who are identifying what they need and then are actually actively interested in learning the skills of coping with any of those fears of selfishness and then negotiating with the world in more detail. So I see this all the time when women start to grow, and then they inspire other people and they step out to start a business, for example. And so that's another level of growth where they say, oh, am I worthy of that? Am I good enough? Doesn't everybody have these skills? And so to actually back yourself with a sense of inspirational leadership requires another level of that support and self-belief as well.
I remember one time someone saying to me, Grace, do you have your own back? And in that moment, when that person asked me, I got the awareness that I didn't. And then he asked me a question. He said, can you truly have the backs of others when you haven't got your own back? And the awareness I got from that was only to the level of what I have my back, And so what I'm finding with the women in my life, I'm blessed that I have someone that I can communicate that with. The more I'm growing with having my own back and seeing how other women have their back, and that it isn't selfish, it's not wrong, it's okay to say I require this. Yeah,
And so
invaluable.
isn't that the
Sorry,
truth? Isn't that the truth of a tribe? And
yeah, to actually, to go where you're celebrated. For me, it's like I continually ask the universe to show me kind gentlemen and gentlewomen, ladies, who actually have their own back and that I can create greater with. And I never even thought that was possible. I just thought friends came and I didn't have a say in that. But the more I realize I can cut this chicken, sorry for the vegetarians out there, how I choose to, I can choose. It's a whole new world.
Yes. And I think that's a really good point, is that you become more discerning about your tribe,
able to say no.
Exactly. And then able to make requests. You're able to screen who are the people that are going to be most nourishing. And I love the idea of having your own back and then having other people that have your back, because it feeds into this idea of presence. And so it's not an intellectual exercise. You actually feel the presence of someone, that they're there to support you. Yeah. And I think that's something that women do particularly well. The idea of female intuition is not just a poetic thing. It's a service to the tribe. It's a service to families, and it's a service to men. That they can cut through some of those other things. And it's not good enough to have an agreement that you'll be there if I need you. It's that I need to feel that you're there.
Yeah,
that's something,
it's a real presence thing.
Something that needs to be communicated really clearly to men. It's not that there's an intellectual understanding. I need you to show up. And so with action. And so I see this all the time in a few key areas. One's in the kitchen, like routines, just simple routines about rubbish and benches and dishes. Others with boundaries, with in-laws, or with parenting routines. If some of those things that are really important aren't respected with action, it hurts. And there's a really deep, corrosive sort of burnout things that happens if that's just being overlooked day after day. So giving yourself permission to actually make a big deal out of things that are emotionally important, to be more extreme, is the only way that partners can really show up and have you back.
So how do women hold themselves back in relationship?
I think it's that fear that if I push it, I'm going to break him. If I am illogical, if I'm hysterical, if I'm making a big deal out of things, if I'm fundamentally expressing what I need, I'm being selfish, who's going to want me? Who's going to want someone like that? Now, the irony is that so many women never embrace that 1%. Never. And so I think coming back to that point, and when I discuss that with women, after the initial shock and starting to absorb it, about 10 minutes down the track, they start to smile and they say, what if I made it 5%? Would that be okay? And that sort of becomes something like humor is a great way to take the edge off fears, like we're saying, that playfulness, takes the edge off the danger. And so they'll sort of come back and be sort of naughty, like in sessions to come. Oh, this week, geez, it's been 30. But what does happen is that equally they start to tell stories that they can handle it when things in the relationship don't seem to be going well. They can endure the fear of either calling themselves selfish or their partner calling them irrational or selfish, but he comes back around, or the partner learns how important this is because that had been hidden. And that's magic when that starts to shift.
Yeah, the whole energy that you're speaking from, it's turning the wrongness, I'm selfish, I'm wrong, into the strongness of what can be created now.
Nice,
and you've taken it, it's like you've taken it from the energy of hidden secrets, like,
Yes.
you know, they're privately wishing that their husbands or whatever would change in a way, but they haven't actually communicated anything.
Yes.
And also, do you find that once that energy's gone from wrongness to strongness, it also changes from needy to just actually communicating a requirement?
Absolutely.
It loses the whiny, the naggy, the, you
Absolutely.
know, that energy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So he's not feeling nagged, but he's also not feeling like he's failing. Because internally, when he hears something that seems to be a nag and expresses the pain and the disappointment and her starvation, he feels responsible for having failed her. So if he's getting more detailed feedback, there can be more distance and separation so that the relationship can breathe. But when they come back, they can find each other more successfully. Then he's not carrying any fear or resentment, and he can rejoice in the fact that he can succeed with his partner, and it might be the first time in years. And so from that position of fullness for him, then he's got so much more to give. And so her experience is she can ask in more detail for what she wants, and she receives so much more spontaneously. And whenever she's hurt or lost, he knows exactly where to find her. And so she feels his presence more powerfully. So that's where some of these patterns, even if we're just seeing women individually, effectively it's working as couples counselling because it's changing the dynamic of the relationship.
Yeah, it's funny how when you work on yourself, everyone else around you starts to change.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned that point on that men go into that wrongness, you know, I've failed. Um, um, and for me, that's a really big part of why women don't speak up, because we have that awareness that if we, you know, suggest something or ask for something, he's just going to go into that cycle. So then that's when so what do you do about that when you won't express a need because you've already concluded that he's going to go into wrongness and it's
Yes.
not worth it anyway?
Yes. Well, two things. One is you can give yourself permission to make it worse.
Oh, I like that.
That you can,
That's interesting.
like that expression from the castle, let him suffer in his jocks. You can give yourself permission to make it more extreme because there's been a holding pattern and a band that we don't go beyond this point. So you could give yourself permission to make it worse. Now that makes it more defined, and it says, you know what, there's an issue here that's hurting both of us. So rather than glossing over and going back, by making it more extreme, one possibility is that it could draw a line in the sand where it's like we have to do this differently. What you could do simultaneously is acknowledge that that's, you know, in general terms, culturally, that is men's greatest fear, is that they haven't been strong enough, they haven't been smart enough, and they haven't succeeded as a partner. So you would look at areas of where could you praise his strength? And he's not going to ask for that. One, because he's a man, and two, because he's Australian. But he is going to be, and even if he brushes it off, he is the more fragile he is in whatever way, which can be expressed through all sorts of things. You know, in the most extreme cases, you know, domestic violence. But he's going to need feedback about his value, and the more specific that is, the better. And chances are you're going to see an increase in that behavior and other behaviors based on that praise.
You know what's interesting that I picked up when you were just speaking? It's about having that different conversation, and where I saw that going into was it goes from that expression of neediness to, hey, what can we together create? What can we choose together to change this? So it loses that wrongness of I need you to, you know, blah blah blah. It's like, hey, in relation to the dishes, what can we create? What can we choose that's different?
And those choices, a lot of people would say, well, we can't focus on the negatives, you know, and there's a lot of research that talks about the positive things that couples do. But what I find is that if there is a sore spot that hasn't been acknowledged fully,
yeah,
for both of you, And usually that's where that pattern happens. So the relationship might be really strong. It's a really sophisticated, mature relationship, but there might be some points where there are these sore spots that haven't been acknowledged, that can't be fully cared for. It means that you're kind of walking through a place where there are landmines, that you could trip over them at any time, and that each partner could be really desperately hurt without the other having any awareness of it. And so if that's the case...
Wow. And so it's not enough to just acknowledge it to you and your girlfriends. What you're saying is that on those landmine issues, for example, you're saying it's actually vital to let your partner know, hey, that hurt.
Everything changes.
Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, absolutely. And for them to understand the full gravity of that. And that's what happens in couples counselling, is that we can actually slow things down, we can stop things, and we can just say, let's just take a moment to look at this, to feel this, often for the first time more fully. And both parties have had insight into this and they've gone, yeah, but. It's like, no, but. Let's just slow this down and show some respect. And at that moment, tears start to come. And then the other partner, who a moment ago was on the attack, their heart comes out of their chest, they get out of their chair and they hold their partner. And it's like, okay, all right. So we knew this was here, but we'd never learned to care for it fully. Let's formally make some time for this. As a result of the beauty and the safety of that, so much easier to find each other. You're not walking around with these X factor landmines. And then from that place, then we can be really playfully creative about how we're going to do things differently.
Yeah, because if they're still there, even if you get to the positive thing, that landmine can still get triggered if it hasn't been seen, and the light of consciousness kind of illuminated again, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And this is where there's an opportunity for women to be true leaders in their relationships. So if a woman wants to give herself permission to make that pain far more explicit, and what she needs far more explicit, not only is he able to have a better chance of success, but from that place of having that modeled, and then from that place where he's been more successful, then it becomes more normal for him to talk about any area that he's vulnerable in. And so that is a genuine form of leadership. That hasn't been selfish. And often, frankly, it's not going to come from the guy. So that is a genuine form of leadership. And it takes a lot of guts and support for women to push into that. But once they do, often it's the catalyst that reshapes the relationship, and then reshapes the way that he functions in the world.
I keep coming back to that energy, and I don't think I'm alone in it. I think I'm not the only woman out there, but to be vulnerable with a guy in that moment and be aware of how that's affecting him. I think that's the, you don't want to say something that is they're going to go into wrongness about. Sure. But I'm hearing from you that's super important, and I'm really actually getting that now, that it is actually a requirement. What do you say to women who, they struggle with actually saying that, because at the same time they're going into how much that's going to potentially, their partner go into wrong. Yeah.
And look, you make a really good point. So I'm talking about the fact that yes, that's ideally an important part of the process. But let's just take a moment to acknowledge that, and that's where a lot of women are stuck, in that the partners that they're with, may have a traumatic background where they're, incredibly overwhelmed. For some couples, that's going to be really unsafe. That he might be hanging on by his fingernails in some ways, and so to press into this is going to trigger him in a way which is really, really unsafe. So the challenge there is to say that if she needs to continue to grow, which she does, and she's not able to grow directly with her partner at this moment, then what options does she have for growth? And so she's going to have to go deeper and broader outside of the relationship. And so that means being more explicit with friends and giving them even more detail about, okay, I know that you want to protect me. I know this relationship is far from perfect right now, but I'm actually not needing any judgment. I'm just needing to know that you've got my back where I'm at right now. And then to, you know, also do that potentially with professional assistance as well.
Yeah, you make such a valid point, because there's the issue of, you know, you could have come to conclusions that he's hanging on by a thread, but maybe he's actually well and truly strong enough to handle that. And that's something that, with talking to a professional, you'd be able to together work out, is this something I can, is this something that I can speak to my partner about, or do I need to just keep it between us
and
and my friend?
this is where we need the tribe, because both can be true. You know, sometimes it can be, you know, physically dangerous. Other times that those fears aren't quite true. And if things are pushed by her stepping in with her presence more powerfully, then he just dissolves, you know. Or it looks like things are falling apart, but they've got an opportunity to be reformed. And ultimately, that's what mature relationships are about. It's not locking in with this static soulmate sort of thing. It's about, how do we reform? It's about, how do we continue to grow in our own ways as separate, different individuals, but how do we come back together to the truth of who we're becoming? And so it's really that process of repeatedly, just like a breath, in and out, just that we come apart, we come together. But the skill over time is, you know, who are we coming back to? And that has to be defined, you know, with other people outside of the relationship.
And really, that's the beauty of just spending that time with someone, you know, that you trust, a professional that you trust, or however it shows up for you. You know, what I've just heard from this little time together, it's like, well, you need to acknowledge your needs, and and indulge in that, and maybe turn it from that 1% to a little bit more. And it's amazing, as you're speaking, I can perceive all the women out there that have hidden all this stuff that they don't tell their friends sometimes, certainly don't tell their relationships. Whereas actually, if it got illuminated and it actually came out as, hey, this is actually what I require right now, so much greater is possible.
And then, you know, any of the fears or the hollowness of depression, it doesn't have the same power, because you're feeling that, you know, you've got the energy of being connected with, based on what you need. You're feeling nourished. You've got the energy to you know, be more of who you are. And the beautiful thing is that as that unfolds, that we start to inspire other people by doing nothing.
Yeah, just by being
ourselves, exactly. which is just amazing. Yeah.
And, you know, to me, that's just the ultimate. It's like, it's okay to change. This is actually something that's to be celebrated.
Yes.
And to actually give yourself that, whether it's a hobby or whatever it is that you need, is actually going to create greater for everybody, not just yourself.
Absolutely.
Todd, thank you.
It's my pleasure, Grace. Yeah, it's always a delight to talk to you, and it's been great to have a companion to the men's interview that we did. So I'm so grateful.
Yeah. How do people find you?
Easiest way is just my website. So it's just toddzemek.com.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Always insightful. So much. I've got so much in my head right now. I feel like I could talk to you for another 5 hours.
These are lifelong conversations, aren't they?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. But thank you for celebrating women. Thank you for being there for men as well. And I love the work that you do. I'm very, very grateful you exist on the planet.
Likewise, Grace. Yeah. I'm really conscious of what you bring and what you're all about. So it's enormously appreciated. And great honour to work with you.